welcome, Brent. This is our second discussion. It's great to have you back. And just as a reminder to people who'll be watching, give a little introduction to yourself, if that would be possible.
Sure. I'm Brent. It's always good to talk to you, Bruce, seriously. I work in behavioral health. I've got advanced degrees, a few PhDs. I'm a training candidate at the Institute for Contemporary Psychoanalysis. I've been working in the field for about 27 years, I think. Published some books and done other stuff. So this area is kind of a calling for me, and I'm really, I really enjoy it, no matter how long I'm doing it. So.
You've done a lot of stuff. I think you do yourself, you put yourself down a little bit. You've done a lot of stuff. Very impressive resume you've got, and it
just makes me old. I think I never left the party. I started when I was 18 and just stayed, and yeah, then good things happened.
Yeah. So I mean, our last discussion we covered an awful lot of very wide-ranging stuff, which opened, I think, the territory that our conversations are likely to cover, because we share a lot of concerns about what's going on in the world with postmodernism, the kind of the cult of Black Lives Matter, the attack on free speech, etc., etc., and all the COVID-19 1984 response, as I call it. There are a lot of the sort of totalitarian tones that are running through many different countries at the moment. But since we last spoke, I think it was in November, we've had the United States the election, and I know roughly what's happened here, but I'd like to get your thoughts of what is your thoughts on what happened during the election with regarding the possible electoral fraud, and now the inauguration was just the other day. What's your thoughts and feelings on that?
It is pretty wild, and again, and this kind of links to what we were talking about before. Just from my perspective, I don't feel like I'm really representing one side or the other in these things, and it is bifurcated. You're on one side or the other, but more of my concern, especially from a psychoanalytic perspective, is digging deeper. Like, where's the critical thinking in all of this? So there was the election, and there were a number of very curious things that happened that really seemed to tilt things in Biden's direction. There's video footage of things. There's a lot of complaints. There was a lot of suspicious activity, and there was no research into these complaints or what happened. When I speak to my friends on the left, they say, literally, this is the safest, most well-protected, perfect election, arguably in American history, is what they tell me. And as I listen to them, I think to myself, well, isn't that a reason to look into any of the complaints and things like that? If it really is perfect, then what is the harm in that? And secondly, if it is the most secure, amazing election in American history, don't you want to research that so we can do it again?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the lack of critical thinking, or just what happened, I guess will remain mysterious, probably forever, or maybe we'll find something out. So Biden took office under really interesting conditions. I don't, in my lifetime, remember an election that was this contested, or with this number of things that were coming up. And it's just amazing. And one of the things that really surprised me is that, well, their guy got into office, so I guess they won. Okay, I don't know. We don't know by what means or how valid those means are, but he's being ushered in. Mm-hmm. And with that, just what really surprised me is this relentless anger that now we're going to try and impeach Trump as he's walking out the door is just like sadistic in my mind. He spent 4 years under investigation for everything in his life,
Yeah.
and they've yet to dig up anything. And if they could, they would have a parade. There would be,
Mhm.
and now all of these talks about deprogramming or going after his supporters. I mean, it, it just boggles my mind the level of anger and sadism that side seems to have. I always underestimate. You think, oh, your guy won. Okay, well, enjoy your victory by whatever means. But no, it doesn't stop there. We have to push harder, keep going. The governors push things right back down into lockdown in many states here. Right after that, it was just a very violent situation. And again, I'm not saying you've got to be a pro-Trump dude or whatever. I'm a libertarian, so I'm not Republican even, but just the level of vehemence and violence and a lack of any sort of grace or just tolerance to these things is astounding.
Yeah. I mean, I never followed it really closely, but something my antennae went up, and I thought, because I studied psychology and a PhD, and I looked at data and statistics, and I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was something along the lines of, in some of the states, Trump was leading, and and then suddenly a whole lot of data came in to push Biden at the top. It was like it seemed to me like this is not how when people are voting, there's a kind of pattern emerges. It doesn't just go from one pattern all of a sudden to change, within an hour or something. Like all this.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention this because it's not scientific. It's not anything based on whatever. But there is something to be said. Like you, I've got a few PhDs in that we study statistics. And in research we study statistics, analyze statistics. And there's a certain way that numbers behave. Like after you read and understand enough math, there's a certain thing that you kind of get the sense of it. And as I was watching the data roll in, I mean, it was just, and this isn't science, this is just something that in the back of my mind, I was like, wow, these numbers are behaving really strangely.
Yes.
Like, how is it moving that much? It just struck me as really odd,
Yeah.
the way that they moved. And some of my friends who know more about math than I do were saying, yeah, there's something suspicious about that because the numbers aren't supposed to really do that. But again, it's not science or whatever, but there were so many suspicious things,
Yeah.
that and a number of questions about the voting machines and how and when the numbers click over. It's really odd.
Yeah. It was just a hunch, because when you're studying and learning, and I was learning about data and statistical analysis, when you read, you look at data and go, that doesn't look right. There's something odd about it.
Yeah.
But
But I can't prove anything, obviously. But
yeah,
when I was seeing that, I was like, the numbers are behaving so strangely. Like I would almost expect more that it would be like because we know it's pretty divided, like half and half and half and half and half, and then by some infinitesimally small margin or so, then someone would sort of pan out. But just the way that it moved that much, even for, I know they're tallying states at a time and calling in the votes, but just the way it behaved just struck me as odd, for sure.
I just imagined like a kind of PhD Viva and someone bringing that data in and in time, and the external examiner looking at it and going, how the hell did this happen?
Yeah, that's actually an excellent point, Bruce. I'm thinking back to like all the classes I took in statistics, and I was like, if this is something I ran and then I did the statistics and brought that data to the professor, I am sure that there'd be some questions about, well, wait a minute, how did it move this much?
Yeah, I think there'd be some suspicions. I mean, like this doesn't behave according to the laws of nature,
right?
or probability, But I was, it was of course, the Democrat people who were supporting the Democrats, they were extremely happy. They were getting rid of Trump, and you know, fair enough. That's who they support. Great. But you know, and they were hoping, they were waiting for the big speech from Biden, and some inspiring, heartwarming, bold kind of statement, and he comes out with something like "mask up." It was utterly depressing. I just remember him. That was one of his first things he said was "put a mask on." You know, it was the most uninspired, bleak kind of arrival onto the presidential stage that I'd seen. You know, I mean,
But that's not how they see
yeah.
it. Yeah, I was taken aback by that too, just like, of course. And he had been talking about that leading up to that, like, we're just gonna, if you thought you had to wear masks and were locked down before, look out, here we come. He was very open about that, but that's not the way the people, my friends who are on the left who support him, look past that, and there's no thinking about that at all. You know, they say, you know, he's going to be the great unifier. Thank God the world is coming back to its senses. He's going to unite everything. There's a kind of almost messianic vision of him, which baffles me, because had the situation been different, and I talked to my friends on the left and said, thank God Trump got it. He's going to unify. It's going to be awesome. He's just the best. I don't think they would have the same response. But do you see what I mean? There's this subtle, like, when it's on our side, there's no context. It's just like, so long as our side is pushing through, then reality is happening. But anyone else who thinks different than me, well, that's just some kind of insane anomaly, and you're also racist or sexist or whatever negative things they have. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
They don't think at all like, well, if Trump won, would you look at him and say, oh, thank God, it's a great unifier? Really? You know, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, no, it's very odd, and then there was the inauguration. I think it was yesterday or the day before. I've lost sense of time, but I noticed Lady Gaga sang a song there without a mask on. I noticed. I always thought there was a deadly pandemic going on, but and there was a lot of people without masks on during the ceremony, and a very heavy military presence around for such a welcome president. Very odd, that, isn't it?
This whole, we've sort of defeated fascism, now let's bring in all the troops and have this barricaded off with tanks and da-da-da, is really, you know, it's like, and you won the the election by that many? Wow. One would think if you have to be that well fortified. I don't recall in my history such thing. It's even more when Bush Jr., that inauguration was very stood out in American history, at least contemporary history. It's like, wow, he couldn't even really do the full inauguration. It was really bad. But that pales in comparison to having how many thousand National Guards been there, and just a very interesting way to usher in the great unifier.
Yeah, it's very strange, you know, and you know, of course, often I think the politics at the moment they're like they're trolling the ordinary person, because it's like there was Lady Gaga singing. Of course, in Scotland, for example, you're not allowed to sing. Singing's outlawed. You can't sing in a church. Well, churches are closed at the moment. You can't. Well, the schools are closed too, of course. But even when they were open, you couldn't sing. And there is Lady Gaga on a huge stage. It's almost like something out of the Hunger Games, you know, all the elites standing on a big stage, flaunting their life and their freedom, yet all the people below, subjugated, can't do a lot of these things. And I thought it was very odd how they flaunt this privilege, you know.
Yeah, there's a weird way that they flaunt it and at the same time engage in a kind of totemism, like my friends on the left were also saying there was a young lady there who was talking about poetry, and they kept talking about that she was Black. And I was like, why do identity politics have to do with this? And but do you see what I mean? On the one hand, they flaunt their thing, and then they think that they're being all inclusive with some kind of totemism that is linked to race somehow. And I was like, why can't she just be an amazing poet, which undoubtedly she is. I didn't see it, but I, you know, by most accounts she is. But do you see what I mean? It sort of even undercuts her ability as a poet to identify her in a certain way. So it seems that's just one example. It seems to me they really flaunt all these things, but have an entirely different expectation for the serfs, or you know,
Yeah.
those of us who are like that. Like we don't have to wear masks and do all of this. And they were surrounded by an awful lot of guns for being anti-gun and
Yes.
anti-police.
Yes.
There's this weird like double world that they live in that I
Yeah.
can't
Yes,
quite figure out.
I thought they were all against guns. That's right enough. Looks like they became quite enamored with the sight of guns by the looks at the inauguration. But these double standards, that they're very prevalent in Scotland as well at the moment. Just before Christmas, Nicholas, because in Scotland, you're only allowed about 10 people at a funeral or something. You know, I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
And only immediate family are allowed to go. Only immediate family. But someone in the Scottish government died, and there was a funeral. And Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister, she went to the funeral, and there was a week afterwards. You know, sell kind of a meal or in a pub, a drink, and Nicola Sturgeon was caught without her mask on. You know, and she tells people every day on the television they've got to wear their masks, and chastises people for not wearing a mask. And she was caught, and she had to stand up in the Scottish Parliament a day or two later, and she made some non-apology that she'd forgot it just for a second, and she urged everyone to follow the rules, etc., etc. Not one opposition politician, not one of them, criticised her at all. And then it was just back to business as usual, just dictating all these mandates. And then a couple of weeks ago, there was a small protest outside the Scottish Parliament. Just there wasn't many people at all, you know, and they were outside. It's outside because COVID doesn't spread as much outside, according to the science. And Nicola Sturgeon at the same time was giving her daily briefing on television and saying that people gathering outdoors puts people's lives at risk. As she was standing in a room full of people without a mask on, inside, which COVID spreads more inside apparently. The sort of lack of logic and the almost like trolling the population. It's incredible, you know. And we'll maybe go into detail later about the logic of it, but it's utterly incredible, isn't it? They're not hiding their disdain for people. It looks like.
No, that's actually a really good point. I think that it's becoming more and more apparent, and I think that I kind of underestimated the psychopathy, just the kind of sociopathic element to postmodernism, because it seems to be flaunted more and more with less and less of a self-reflective concern about anyone who might think differently. And it really is anyone who might think differently or not buy into their ideology. And that's a lot of people. That's from libertarians on to conservatives, which is quite a few people. You don't need to be Christian and conservative to be. There are some people, I think on a hopeful note, there was a small handful of my friends who had been lifelong Democrat liberals who in this last election did vote for Trump. And I was surprised, and I asked them, well, I was like, oh wow, you know, how did, And they said, you know, this is going too far. This is totalitarianism, even if it's called liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to be. And I don't think these days, with as much as we've seen COVID now behaving for a while, there are people who are just adamantly anti-mask.
Mm-hmm.
I think that most of us are willing to wear masks if, you know, especially if it's a lot of people, this and that. That's not a big deal, I don't think, to most people. But this notion of we're just going to hammer you with it, you can't go to funeral, and it's very tragic here. I've got a few patients of mine who had family members die, and there was just no gathering. They weren't allowed at all
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do anything. It's tragic.
yeah.
It's just this hammering away at this as if it is objective reality without any self-reflective thought that someone might think different than you is bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, when people like Nicola Sturgeon or other or American politicians flaunting the route, like Nancy Pelosi, who went to the hairdressers and didn't wear a mask and all that kind of thing, when the people see that, they must, you know, because they're involved with behavioural psychology and applied psychology to manipulate and coerce people. They surely, anyone with two brain cells, if they rub it together, they can say that this is not a good look. It's not got to make people feel like they want to comply, even if
they don't. The curious thing is, I almost wonder if they don't even notice if it's gone far enough that the very capacity to give thought to another perspective is starting to erode.
Yeah.
I mean, by the behavior of these people who fly off and they're on vacation and while everyone else is in, or just not wearing masks when everyone else has, they act as if you like watch their behavior, there's no issue with it.
Yeah.
They're not looking like they're trying to hide or, oh, wait, I got busted. I might get caught. Someone might, because everything's cameraed these days, someone might see me. Or no, they just seem like, it's not hypocrisy when I do it. So I'm just going to do what I do.
It reminds me of domestic abuse. Domestic abuse. I mean, I've been dealing with let's just say, loosely speaking, I don't want to give away the details. It's not a patient, but I've been dealing with a domestic abuse scenario at the moment. The abuser was a female, the victim was a male, and you know, I've known it's been going on for many years now, and it came to fruition that, just before Christmas, where the abuser was arrested. But anyways, the partner of this abuser, you know, she would never admit she did anything wrong. You know, she would, even though if you presented her with the evidence that you are a domestic abuser, you hit this person. Hitting people is domestic abuse. You know, biting them, scratching them, destroying their computer, stopping them see their family, stopping them going to work, you know, gaslighting them, etc., etc. You present it to them and say, hey, this is not on. And the response is, not my fault. Oh, it was a mistake. Don't blame me. In the government, when they get caught out, I mean, people have been caught out in the UK. A lot of politicians for doing, you know, not wearing a mask, going on holiday, flaunting the travel restrictions, etc. When they get caught out, it's like, oh well, come on, I've not done anything wrong. I was just doing this, that, and the other. It's they have the kind of mentality of a domestic abuser.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it seems very, very in hand.
Well, it's very like you know, in psychoanalysis, we'd say it's like, yeah, it's really like egosyntonic would probably be the term that we use, where everything lines up and there's no variation to such a degree that I just do what I do, and it's fine. You know, one example that was linked to the events surrounding the inauguration was this when some strange folks on the right stormed the Capitol or something like that. And all my friends on the left were like, ha, you know, we've got you, your people were out of control.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that's wild. And so I went back and watched it. And it was like, well, the police let them into the Capitol. And then they were tantruming, as far as I could tell. I mean, they weren't burning things down, or it's more like tantruming, like, hey, and then that was it. And everyone on the right was just making, and still are, such a big deal out of the Capitol being stormed and this and that. And it just didn't have much of an effective reaction in me, because I was like, wait a minute, weren't you guys just shining laser beams in police officers' eyes, like on a big
Yeah.
scale, like burning down businesses, rioting, and like tearing down businesses? 42% will never come back. And just how many people died
Yeah.
in that whole rioting? And there were a few kids that even, but it's not hypocrisy when they do it. It's just what we do to establish good order.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Trump, then we wouldn't need to do any of that.
Yeah.
Bizarre.
It is bizarre. I mean, interestingly, a few weeks ago there was a Black Lives Matter protest in London, and the woman who's one of the Black Lives Matter leaders in the UK, she was arrested because gatherings of people are illegal, or they're not allowed under the COVID regulations. And she wasn't wearing a mask. It was outside. You don't have to wear a mask as yet outside. But she was arrested and put in the back of a van, and she was protesting. She was shouting at the police, and actually I support her, because I'm like, what she's, because I don't agree with the protests are not allowed, but actually the amount of news coverage about that was minimal. You would think, the Black Lives Matter organizer was being arrested, and
you would think that would if not a headline, it would be up there.
Yeah, it was utterly silent, utterly quiet in the media, because of course it highlights what I believe is the idiocy of the COVID regulations, and the breaking of democracy by stopping people. Because Black Lives Matter people have got the right to
Sure
to protest and put forward the things. I mean, what's wrong with that? And but yeah, the media went quiet on it, and I was very surprised that I would thought they were probably the PR probably said, well, you can't really say much because you're pro lockdown, really. You're pro lockdown. You're pro
It wouldn't look good.
It wouldn't look good if you start making a fuss about this. But anyway, I'm digressing, and I want to get onto this because we're both therapists. And
wait, just real quick, if I could just toss one thing in. After Biden made it in, the left was rioting again and burning things down in Portland and Seattle, so on the West Coast.
Really?
And it got like almost no news coverage at all.
Right. Wow.
Biden is silent on that. They were with Trump after that Capitol tantrum happened. With him, they were like, you have to denounce, you're not denouncing, you cause. He went on and basically was saying, everyone chill out. And we're all law-abiding people, or should be. Biden, to my knowledge, has said, or anyone on his side, they've said nothing about that. They've said really nothing about any of the violence that's taken place thus far, unless it's the one instance of some people on the right, who I'm not even sure they're really representing people on the right, went and tantrumed at the Capitol and misbehaved, and should be held accountable accordingly. But that got a lot of coverage. But people ripping stuff up in Portland and Seattle, sort of like, well, they're going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not good when they're covering it up, or being silent about it. But that takes us to free speech and censorship. I think both therapists, and the ramifications of what's going on in society affect us as well. And so regarding the certain issues we've talked about, the rise of identity politics, criticism of Black Lives Matter movements, the censorship and shutdown of free speech. I mean, for me personally, I've talked to other therapists in the UK and psychologists. They are expressing they feel frightened of speaking out against the government narrative, so to speak, whether that's in COVID-19 or queer theory politics in schools, or being anti-Black Lives Matter. And I'm starting to feel the effects of it personally. I mean, back last year, I did some work for a mental health charity, and not much, just a little bit of work, and it was quite a good charity. And I think it stands for very good thing. It was for against suicide, and it's like a suicide charity. And well, that's why it was set up, and it's always. I mean, I think it's good in that respect. But the people who organised the management came across my Twitter account, and of course it didn't fit the bill, and basically they got rid of me. So that was quite a shock to if I just kept quiet about obviously my views, that wouldn't have happened. And another organisation I'm involved with, I wrote an article on the applied psychology of the Psychologist in the UK government, and how they are manipulating and coercing people to be more fearful of COVID, and they need to be, and creating a culture of shame where they're encouraging people to shame, to adhere to COVID measures, etc., etc. And I wrote an article. It was on the UK Column website called "Psychological Attack in the UK." I wrote in it that it breaks, and I've outlined it very clearly how it breaks the ethical guidelines of the British Psychological Society. And I have got support from other psychologists and therapists in the UK who have read it and support what I've said. I'm not a member of the British Psychological Society, by the way, but these people are. The other people who support me are. And they can't believe that the British Psychological Society and their regulator, the Health and Care Professions Council, are silent about these abuses of applied psychology, which is akin to, I would say, akin to the domestic abuse on a population level, because they're stopping people meet their families, stopping people worship, stopping people make money, making people more fearful than they should be, etc., etc. And I've found in the therapy world, and this one organisation that I'm part of, is that these views are frowned upon. So to speak out, I mean, because psychotherapy is, I always seen it, especially in many different kind of camps of RD laying sort of historical roots. It's always about speaking against dogma, always speaking up against mystification. But I think what I'm experiencing, and what many people are experiencing, is a reverting back to worshipping dogma and not questioning dogma. What do you think of that? I mean,
well, as Heidegger said, no man is without a religion. I think that's really true, that this postmodernism or cultural Marxism, or whatever one wants to call it, has really taken on a cult-like vision of the world. And it is frightening to really interact with them and see just how much their perspective on things is not an opinion amongst other opinions or anything. It is reality. And it really, these are very high degree holding, well-established folks, a lot of them, who in every other area of their life seems to be very thoughtful, but there's a peculiar blank space around this. And I've experienced sort of what you're talking about too. In the way I've experienced it is that it's like, this is reality, and anything that's at variance with that, not even opposed to it, but doesn't fit this, we're just going to kind of nudge you out. Like, you just don't fit here. And, so you're just sort of like, there's no room for you anymore. And again, this is not like a diametrically opposed opinion, like I disagree. Just anything that's not that doesn't provide a sense of internal consistency is then just out. And they do nudge kind of out. And I hate to say it, but postmodernism has really taken over, especially the psychotherapy realm. I was required to, with one of my past contracts in recent history, attend, I think it was almost 30-hour training. And this was on a broad topic like domestic violence. And for the duration of that, the host of it had a BLM flag behind her on the wall. And the whole training was really about, the queer agenda, Black Lives Matter. And I mean, very expressively so. It was not my interpretation at all. I just sat quietly and listened, somewhat in awe of how every single Marxist sort of idea was being trained to all these people. Like, this is your training so that you're up to speed. It's a required training. And listening to that and just going, this is frightening. This is frightening. And again, sort of like with the, if Trump wanted, if I was providing a training for a neutral state, the state was providing this, which is supposed to be separate from whatever, and I had, okay, we're going to talk about, let's just say domestic violence. It could also be depression, suicide, whatever, a general topic, right? Not specific. And in the background, I had a picture of, or a banner of Jesus. And then I started giving the training saying, listen, we need to read scripture more. Can we read together some scripture? I want to give you some testimony about how fast do you think that would just, there would be riots, there would be calls, there would be emails, there would be, but when they do it, it's so incredibly just like, well, we're reality. So we're just getting you in touch with reality when we train you.
Well, it's interesting.
It's frightening.
It is frightening. I've recently done some teaching for some places, and my teaching was basically teaching some of the speeches of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a Soviet dissident. He spent time in the Gulag. He converted to Christianity in the Gulag. But he was a communist, a full-blown Marxist before he went in there. And talks about some of the sort of the kind of communistic elements that he warned that the West might be, or he would be experiencing, and he's quite prophetic. And so it's some of that, and and also the other person I was teaching was a Christian existentialist who you'll know well, Soren Kierkegaard. And so I was looking at these in terms of psychotherapy, their value to it. And so what was my point? The point was there were some concerns raised about the content of the teaching, because it was I suppose it was kind of Christian, and it was very interesting how these concerns. I mean, Soren Kierkegaard's a lot of people use Soren Kierkegaard in their idea.
Pretty well established existentialist. I mean,
yeah,
I mean Nietzsche, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's not like controversial, but it's interesting. I heard a similar tale from a therapist doing psychotherapy with a Christian slant to it, and they got a legal opinion about, because they got a complaint or something, and they got a legal opinion just to check it out. And basically, the lawyer who's, I don't know, seemed to be schooled in the art of social justice war, basically said, oh well, it could be construed that your teaching is discriminatory for other religious ideas or practices or traditions. The person said, well, I'm doing it's existential Christianity I'm teaching or something like that. Oh, it doesn't matter. Well, but that's what I'm teaching. That doesn't matter. It could be discriminatory. Someone could take offense to it. So that's where we are. So
Yeah. And again, it's that weirdo bubble, and if you don't fit into it, then it's just not okay. And I think that that's a critical difference that I want to point out between like my perspective or someone who might be in a similar neighborhood and the perspective of postmodernism is that, sometimes they say, ha, you're Christian, you want to evangelize the world, you want everyone to be. And actually, that's not the case at all. I think a fundamental and really important difference is that kind of the perspective that you, me, and a handful of other people are talking about is more about freedom. I do think, we were talking earlier, I think that people in BLM have a right to protest. They have a right to have their opinion. There has to be different spaces where different people have different rights. And anyone who understands Christianity understands well that you can't punish someone into not sinning or to become a Christian. That's wrong. It's very wrong. People who choose that path are allowed to choose that path. Jesus is clear about this too. People who you have an option to not choose that path or to choose any path that you want. And we have to preserve that fundamental freedom and open-mindedness that used to be a part of the left when I was with them.
yeah,
We used to be anti-violence. We used to be open to different ideas. We used to be for free speech. We used to be anti-war. What happened? I don't know, but I think that's a real fundamental difference to remember is I want multiplicity, pluralism. I want all different kinds of perspectives. And I'm so grateful, God, that I went to college and high school, especially. I went to a good high school where you would go and you'd learn different things. Here is the way I think. Here's a different idea. Oh, maybe there's a different way to see it. That notion of critical thinking, symbolism, self-reflection is just going away. And if it's not in their bubble, then as you put, it's like someone might be offended or someone might be, people should be offended. The way that you view the world, if you're in just a like myopic, this is the only way it is, it should be offended. I mean,
yeah,
because the world is messy, it's pluralistic, there's people with all different kinds of views, and everyone has a right to have that. And the second anyone on the right or the left slips into here's how it's got to be for you to teach, here's what you need to read, here's how you need to behave, here are the values you need to have, no matter what you really think, that is exceedingly dangerous. And my friends on the left say, I see nothing like socialism out there or communism coming on board or nothing, none of this postmodernist stuff you talk about. I don't see it. And I'm like, that's what makes it work.
yeah. Well, it's
because you're a part of it.
yeah. And then in some other teaching I was doing, I got again one of the students. They came across my Twitter or Facebook account or whatever, and were very concerned of what they've seen. And I got a communication from the organisation that I did the teaching for saying, oh, what's your thoughts? We would like to know your thoughts on this. What are your thoughts? It's very kind of cultural Marxist. Let's know your thoughts on this. I said, I don't know what you're on about. What be more specific. Explain what your concerns are or the students' concerns were. What are they? And it was very vague. It was like, oh, it was something to do with Black Lives Matter or queer theory or something like that. And I said, well, and I'd be more precise, but they weren't more precise. And they said, well, you should be aware of the implications of your views. And so I wrote back and I said, listen, here's what you do to tell your students. These are psychotherapy students. Here's what you do, right? When they start the course, tell them if they are offended by certain views on social media, don't go on social media, right? Okay? And if they do go on it, they might get upset. That's a good start. But I said, but I would add, if they get so upset about other people's views or views that they don't like, I suggest they're probably not fit to train as a psychotherapist. And I left it at that. I thought, I'm not really having this bullshit, because I'm always reminded of Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, who is one of the great original queer theorists as well, ironically. But he said something very, you know, he was very, I think he had some important ideas on free speech and fearless speech, and because he wrote about it in his lectures at the College de France, and his book called Fearless Speech, actually, which in Greek, he was looking at ancient Greek societies in what he called parrhesia, fearless speech. And he says that the function of a good civilization is where you can have dangerous speech which is offensive to people or upsetting. Because once you start delineating, well, you can't say that anymore, and you can't upset people anymore, and people become more and more frightened, civilization starts to deteriorate, as you know, a civilized society. And you know, of course, psychotherapy is all about fearless speech. It's about,
Has to be.
yeah.
It has to be. It has to be. And you have to have an exceedingly open mind to and welcoming to the variety of human experience that's going to, and you have to honor that, that's going to cross your doorstep. And it's just terrifying to me at the degree to which there is this increasing sort of analysis of, we need to know what you're thinking. We need to know that you're on our side. We need to know, I mean, that should just be terrifying, where the standard when I was younger used to be, you know, that professor, I don't like what he or she has to say. That's not a good class. I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's
like,
it.
what is this now? What do you think we need to find out? But, you know, what's wrong with just, you know, if there's something on TV I don't like, I turn the channel.
Yeah.
There doesn't need to be an investigation into what they're thinking and what their position really is, so that I feel comfortable with. I mean, that's a wild, I'm surprised that people aren't more offended by this. I mean, shouldn't there be a pluralism of ideas? Shouldn't there be competing ideas that don't agree? I mean, James Hillman famously said, and it's one of my favorite quotes of his, the heretic's place is in the church. The heretic's place is in the church.
Yeah.
Heresy and order go together. You have to have that balance, or else you just lapse into a kind of one-sided fundamentalist literalism.
Yeah.
And that's not okay, whether it's on the right or the left.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's very dangerous. I mean, on my travels to the Eastern Europe and meeting people who lived under communism there, this very psychiatrist who influenced me a lot there, Dr. Alexander Alexichek, who I met again on the other day on Zoom, because I joined one of his group therapy sessions in Lithuania at the hospital. It was very interesting. I might do a YouTube in that one day, but talk to
That'd be cool.
work. But he suggested some readings to help me in my journey, not psychotherapeutic, but he suggested a Russian philosopher called Lev Shestov. I don't know if you've heard of Lev Shestov. Very interesting, kind of Kierkegaardian, coming from the Christian tradition, I would say. And he said something very interesting. He said, he says, philosophy, and I would apply this to psychotherapy as well, and training to be a therapist, but not just for life in general. He said that philosophy shouldn't be something that aims to get some sort of soothing narrative or story to make one feel happy and cozy. Philosophy should be something that shakes the ground you sit on. Should shake it and tremble and make you frightened. Challenge you, you know, really challenge you. And because the kind of the groups that this psychiatrist that I mentioned runs, his groups are extremely challenging. He challenges the patients, he challenges the guests, the therapists who are there in the room as well. Everyone is challenged the whole time. It's quite nerve-wracking. It's quite disturbing, you know. And you know, I made some comments during the seminar, the discussion at the end. And you know, group work's not my speciality. I know a bit about it, but it was a new person running the group for the first time, and I was working through a translator. And you know, I made some observations about the timing of the group and how much time she was giving to people. She was trying to give them equal time. You know, I was thinking about Heidegger, and I was thinking about how, you know, a smile for one person can last an eternity. They can last with them, or you know, someone doesn't need equal time, because time is relative to the person's experience of what they're experiencing. And I said I don't want to sound too critical, but you know, this is what, you know, maybe someone doesn't need 5 minutes each. Maybe they need one minute. Maybe 1 minute can be an eternity for someone. It'll last them forever. I mean, I know some moments for me have lasted forever, you know, and you know, have a profound effect in me. Whereas huge expanses of time have meant nothing to me. So I said that. That was one of my kind of observations. And the psychiatrist, Dr. Alexis, shot back at me and went, "Well, what are you on about? You know, in the Eastern Bloc, basically, in Russia and Lithuania, and it's not about being critical. You have to be like this. Why is this shirking back of speaking truth? You know, he's kind of challenging me. Well, why are you saying that? I don't want to be critical. I don't want to be critical. But yeah, but you have to be critical sometimes. You have to be upsetting, unsettling. You know, I mean,
you mentioned Heidegger. Heidegger sort of suggested that that's the only sort of precondition under which true growth happens, is when our routines and our everydayness, something slices through that, and we're forced to sort of reorient and understand a new comportment, a new way of being in the world. And it's just, when you're talking, it reminds me of what I was writing about in my last book that I still struggle to like try and articulate. But, you know, as life goes on and one matures, if one's engaged in life and struggling with the questions and things like that, the sorts of responses and engagement that one should get should be, for the most part, more assertive and more varied somehow, in a sense of like, well, yeah, in that group, I found that part really offensive and that was challenging. But, you know, on the other hand, maybe they have a point, but maybe I don't like the way they said it. Do you see what I mean? There's some texture and some variance to what's happening, instead of just like, it's either this way or I'm offended. It's either good or it's bad, or it's either totally this or totally this, which is where the Western mind these days has landed. In a weird way. There's none of this challenging. There's none of this. And I don't think anyone who was trained, at least in our generation past, who took philosophy ever thought it should be safe.
Yeah.
Or psychotherapy should be safe. I mean, Lang famously referred to psychotherapy. He always used the metaphor of martial arts.
Yes. Yes.
Which is a very apt metaphor. I mean, life isn't safe.
No.
There's no one spot or the other spot that one is going to land in where you're totally and completely safe. James Hillman talked a lot about that too, kind of America's addiction, or maybe the West now, to safety and security. There's nothing safe and secure about life. We have moments of delightful happiness and freedom and safety, and those should be preserved and made possible for as many people as possible. That's great. But I mean, there are some real tragic elements to life. No matter how well off you are, you're going to get sick. You're going to have loss. Your body will begin to deteriorate. There is going to be tragedy, that things you didn't expect, really bad news. I mean, there has to be a way that we can have a kind of malleability in life without just like the standard being, I am offended.
Yeah.
I mean, you should be offended. What's wrong with being offended? Sometimes, you know, it requires some humility. I don't know about for you, but in my life, I've had some people say some really offensive things to me that I took personally and offensively, got angry, thought about it for a minute, said, I'll be darned. They're right. And I was being a jerk, or
and
whatever the situation is.
They're wrong, but it's like, fail. You have to live with it.
Right. Yeah. Then how do you, right, that's another task. Here is something that's really crappy that's laid at your doorstep. Now, how are you going to deal with that? I mean, that's another one. But we have to have this maturity and flexibility around us. And I don't understand the moralism and literalism and fundamentalism taking place right now. And it is frightening.
Yeah.
me, in the sense that I don't see it de-escalating.
Yeah.
I see it just getting worse and worse and worse and worse.
There's you'll have heard of this guy, and he sadly died just a few weeks ago. Joe Berk, who was involved.
Oh no, I didn't hear about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm familiar with, yeah.
yeah. Well, he was involved with Kingsley Hall, RD Laying, and all that. And actually, he set up his own community in London, the Arbors community, and it was the crisis centre. And I worked there for a while as a kind of locum therapist, working, as they go and stay for the weekend and living with the guests of the house and stuff. And so it was a very interesting. It's shut down sadly now. I think it was a very interesting place, but I actually fell out with Joe Berk. He sacked me. He sacked me from it, and the job. We fell out over something, and up until then we got on quite well. And then after he retired, they invited me back. I said, but I was sacked. He said, well, it's okay. It's water under the bridge now. But so that I was redeemed, but I never went back. I thought, well, it's the end of the road there. But it was, so we didn't part in good ways. But I always respect him for a lot of his views, and I often refer to an essay that he wrote called it was called "The Right to Be at Risk." The right to be at risk. I think you can get it online. I thought it was a wonderful few pages of saying why people in mental distress, there's all this panicking of trying to soothe them and save them. Is a very dangerous thing, and especially in the age of speech, where speech is regarded as dangerous, the right to be at risk. I think Joe Berk would not look upon what's going on today favourably.
It's just wild, yeah. And how on the other hand, it seems like psychology as a vehicle is being used to sort of propagate fear that is not necessary. With this whole COVID thing and the various modalities and ways in which somehow we're supposed to participate in this mass fear is frightening as well. I mean, on the one hand, we have to be challenged and experience fear and this and that, but on the other hand, it's this weird bifurcated existence they seem to have, where we're supposed to, because it's on this side, in this bubble, help propagate this fear in patients and things like that, that is in and of itself debatable, meaning it is of debate. Not saying that it doesn't exist, COVID or and it's not to say totally everyone needs to wear a mask all the time or totally no one needs to wear, but this way in which I think that we may be unethically being asked to transmit fear in a sense, whereas in any other situation as therapists, this would need to be an ethical task, as you were pointing out earlier.
Okay, well, I don't know how much time you've got, but there was one more topic I was wanting to get onto, and that takes us quite nicely to it. But I just need to let the dog out, just 2 seconds, and I'll stop the recording, and then we'll start it again when I come back.
Cool beans.
Okay, so our final topic today. I mean, I had a few topics, but for time, we'll just discuss this. It's very interesting. It came to my mind the other day about, well, as I said, I've written this article about the psychological attack in the UK by the applied psychology team of the UK government and how they are propagating fear. They're wanting to make people more fearful than they need to be. They are creating a culture of shaming people, making people feel bad for not following the COVID rules. And the whole government propaganda, as well as that, is all about propagating fear. And of course, there's many scientists, doctors, healthcare workers are saying the government response, the data does not suggest that we need to be, well, whether you're on the side of lockdown or not, we don't need to be as frightened as we're being told we need to be. And I thought about this from the psychologist's point of view, and I think that what they're doing is very unethical, and I think possibly illegal as well. I mean, I highlight in my article, I'll put a link in below in the video. You're breaking the guidelines, ethical guidelines and practice guidelines of the British Psychological Society, essentially mirroring domestic abuse. They're stopping people meeting, they're stopping making people feel for that, they're stopping people working, transacting, seeing their families, worship, and all these things are enshrined in the guidelines as human, good things that psychology should maintain and not stop, because when you do stop these things, that is abusive. It's against against ethics, unethical, and this is what troubles me. Now, I'm trying to get to my point here. Is basically, my PhD was in the cognitive model of depression, and I researched for years the models of underlying cognition that apply to the cognitive behavioral therapy model, and how people do CBT. I've done CBT myself, certain jobs earlier in my career, and for some people it works. The research, I haven't kept up the research recently, but I mean, it's always been the case. I've always seen that for some people, for people with phobias or some sort of specific anxiety problem, it may be helpful, as a way to help the person get through it. But as you probably know yourself, when it comes to CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy for certain disorders, that the CBT therapist will look at the evidence for someone's thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs, and and how reasonable is this person's anxiety. For example, say it's about flying or snakes, or they think they're going to die of a heart attack or something like that. Then a CBT therapist, ethically, in the way they work, will say, well, okay, let's sit down and look at the evidence. Flying, for example, what's the chances of you dying when you're flying? They'll look at the statistics and look in the noises of the aircraft and go through certain things when the person's on the aircraft, and go through certain methods of, well, that's just the noise of the flaps going up, coming into land, for example, or the bumps is just turbulence, that's completely normal, it's just the aircraft riding on the airstream, and all this kind of thing. So the therapist would go through what is actually happening, and then maybe look at the statistics, and flying's pretty safe, really. Now when it comes to COVID-19, this logical appraisal of things seems to be thrown in the bin. For example, what would a CBT therapist do if a 50-year-old man came in to the office and said, I'm frightened of COVID-19, I think I'm going to die. The government are telling me to act like I've got it. That's what they're saying in the UK. You've got to act like you have it anyways, even if you've got no symptoms. I'm not going to work because I'm frightened of catching it. I am not meeting neighbours, I'm not meeting family. I've been told I can't travel outside the region, etc., etc. And this person's got no underlying health conditions, etc. You would think, a CBT therapist would say, well, you're a 50-year-old man, you've got no underlying health conditions, the probability of dying if you catch COVID-19 is extremely low. It's like 99.5 or 6% chance of living. It looks, they look at the data. I think it was in England and Wales, 400 people under the age of 60 have died since March. I could be wrong in that, maybe, but it's not a lot of people. And so there's something quite odd here. There's something. It's like almost like they've thrown the in generally speaking terms, the kind of good aspects of CBT and how to deal with fear, completely in the bin. And it seems very unethical.
Well, it is, because if you were to do the opposite of that and say to the patient what is being espoused to him, like, oh my God, you're right. You are going to die. I think I might die too. This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. You should never leave your home again. I mean, if we did that, that would be considered wildly off track, right? The correct course of action is to do reality testing and really look objectively at those things. And the question is automatic thoughts. And from a CBT perspective, that would be the standard protocol.
Yeah, it seems I'm struck by this, that the propagandists from the government and the psychologists who work for the UK government are doing this, which is completely the antithesis of how they would work with someone with fear of an illness. This is what makes me...
Well, it's completely internally consistent with their one paradigm world view thing. And again, it's completely unreflective and decontextualized. There's no other context. So by that standard, let's assume that they're correct. Then with that fear, then something like 84% of all Americans die of heart disease, which is linked with obesity, being overweight. Let's look at the percentage of Americans, just my country, of that are overweight. Then we should be fearful, very fearful, and we need to ban all simple carbohydrates. So then that means fast food restaurants, potato chips, candy, all of that should be banned. Let's look at, I mean, there are cars. You are at risk if you get behind the wheel. There is car accidents, drunk drivers, anomalies with driving. This is sleepy drivers, kills probably tens of thousands of people a year. So we should all be very, very fearful. And then cars should be banned. Or, I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. So what's being applied in this one, albeit internally consistent with their perspective, phenomenon, it would be ludicrous to apply that to other phenomenon as well.
Yeah, no, it's very strange, you know. And it's like straight out of the playbook of the old Russia and their communism.
I was going to say 1984, but yeah, similar.
I'm trying to find the page. This is a very interesting book, and I'll read a little couple bits out of it, and then maybe we can wrap up. But
great.
It's called The White Knights, and it's a book by Boris Sokolov, and the subtitle is Pages from a Russian Doctor's Notebook. And he was a doctor in Russia during the years of the Russian Revolution, a survivor of the infamous Batyrki prison, and had a remarkable story to tell. He witnessed all the major events in Russia in 1917 and 1920, the October Revolution, and he saw a lot of these stories here. And I think he met Pavlov, and this is a little bit from the book where he talks about fear and conditioning and that kind of thing. He says, Zeleny laughed. This is our prize project. Ivan Petrovich, that's Ivan Pavlov, I think, attributes great importance to it. As you know, he has proved that the central nervous system directs and controls all functions of the body, in man and animals alike. And now he wants us to establish, through a series of experiments, that such diseases as cancer are also influenced by the central nervous system, or that neurotic persons whose nervous system is overstrained are much more predisposed to cancer than persons with a well-adjusted and balanced normal nervous system. And he says, an ambitious project, I remarked. That's the doctor, Boris Sokolov. Quite, the guy says, but we hope to prove that the etiology of cancer is in the alterations of the central nervous system. Well, this is the first step in that direction. I rendered these dogs neurotic. How? I was fascinated, the doctor, Sokolov said. By using the technique of conditioned reflexes, first by forming them with a bell or light, and then inhibiting them. This technique can induce a state of extreme neurosis in dogs, you can see for yourself they are neurotic, and they were indeed. And now, Zelina continued, we shall see if a malignant tumour develops in these dogs. We might know in a year or two. It was to take more than 20 years, however, to complete the investigation. So essentially, they found that these dogs under extreme stress, putting them in extreme fear all the time, made them very neurotic, ill, and develop physical illnesses. And it seems to me, and this is, I don't want to, I'm afraid I'm going to end in a dark note, but this psychological attack on the people in the UK and in other governments in the world, using applied psychology in this very biased view of COVID-19 and the fear mongering of it, are making people very neurotic and very ill, likely.
We know that. That's, yeah, for sure. I mean, if you look at instances of child abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse, and all of that, as we mentioned last time we spoke, this is really taking very dire shape right now in the mental health and well-being of not just Scotland and America, but world populations as well, especially those who aren't as fortunate as us in some senses, being able to have more resources. The same stress and manipulation is being applied to populations that could only be called poor and vulnerable in many ways. It's inhumane by any way one wants to measure it.
Yeah, I think it's the government. The government in the UK have certainly got some serious questions to answer, because, you know, if you look at it from a rational perspective, to make ordinarily healthy people who are not you know, in great danger from this supposed deadly virus, and we're continually being fed the narrative that we are, and we're not adopting what usual CBT techniques or ideology or kind of ideas to deal with the fear and to get on with our lives. I think,
and a complete lack of anything but bifurcated thinking, which is that it's totally and completely going to kill everyone, or it totally and completely needs to be ignored. There's no sort of reflective thought upon, wow, there is something that's there. It is serious. Here's what we know about it. Now, on the other hand, let's look at the consequences of overreaching and overstepping and demanding, you know, these sorts of things to contend with said thing. You know, there is a way that this can be worked with that isn't what it is now, and might reflect a more mature and thoughtful approaches to what is undoubtedly something that's real in a serious condition for some folks. But it's missing. It's just one or the other.
Yeah, it's certainly missing. You know, it's certainly missing. And I think you know, someone said the other day, you put in the, you know, mainstream radio, and it's utterly depressing, because all you're getting is a story of fear. But of course, people are going to work. People are, especially people working in the hospital, they're going to work. They're coming back. You know, generally for life, for a lot of people, has to continue. But they're having to deal with this all the time. And, you know, teachers, for example, are getting extremely nervous about teaching. Shopkeepers, people who work in shops, you know, they're getting themselves in a terrible state because they think there's death on every corner. But of course, death approaches everyone. We are born to die. We're thrown, as Heidegger says, we're thrown into the world, our throwedness into the world, towards death. We're being towards death. And I think this kind of materialistic, communistic, postmodern philosophy kind of wants to erase the idea that we're trying, you know, that we are going to die, that death is part of life. You know, people are becoming so averse to the idea that, you know, people might die, that we all might, you know, we all going to die. It's a kind of it's a death cult in a sense, but it's anti-death. You know, it's contra the recognition of death. It's contra a healthy relationship to death, you know?
Yeah, it goes back to that kind of, yeah, you're totally right. And it goes back to, I mean, even without COVID, there would be a metaphorical COVID that would happen to us at some point in our lives. Loss, illness, so many things that life just has in store for us, ultimately leading to death. You know, that there's a weird sort of fantasy of security in this sort of way of going about things. And I know we don't have time for it today, but it might be an interesting discussion at some point to look at what we know in psychology for quite a long time now about fear and consumption as in advertising, fear and manipulation, as you were just reading with Pavlov. We know that there is very profitable things to happen when you use fear to manipulate people, because it really speaks to the most primordial aspects of the brain and of our existence.
Yeah.
And it's a very powerful fulcrum. And along the way, there are usually people who benefit from these systems. There are a lot of people right now who demand, as you were sort of pointing out earlier, that everyone lock down and stop working and never leave the house, who have not missed a paycheck or a day of work. I mean, there are people who benefit from these systems of fear and manipulation.
Yeah. Well, Brent, we'll end it there. You know, as usual, as always, I mean, before we start the recording and after, we've got so much to chat about. But I suppose you've got patients to see today, and you've got work to do. So I'll thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
No, thank you so much, man. It is so great to have this small space where there is a little bit of freedom of discussion and different ideas and arguments for pluralism, and you know, just all of that. I mean, I really, really appreciate knowing you and these opportunities.
Yeah, I know. The feeling is mutual. It's great to have someone like you to express my concerns to, you know, because there's
same here.
Not many of us who are out there, or at least willing to talk about it, and so it gives me great joy in my heart to speak with someone like you, and especially in the psychotherapy world, to make me feel like I'm not going too crazy.
No, the feeling is mutual, and I suspect that there's more folks like us out there. It's just the postmodern ideology is so, in the shaming and telling on people, and you're not a part of us. What are you thinking? Is very intimidating. Not accidentally, but I think that if we show some courage and risk offense of some people, then maybe others would step forward as well. And I know that they're there. They talk to you and I in the background, but you know, it's okay to be free. It's okay to not live in fear. It's okay to talk about stuff.
Okay, well, so we've got to not live by lies, as Solzhenitsyn said, and have the courage to do that. That's a good note to end on. So, well, take care, Brent, and we'll speak soon.
Talk to you soon, man.
Bye-bye.